Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 71 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people be making and compare them to the real life fossil counterparts. So today you can see starting up again. So whole new setup, whole new life, new job, new computer, really getting stuck into it. So I'm really excited to see how this turns out. So let's get stuck into it. So, going to be starting off today. We have got a returning pterosaur, one of old Netraptor's ones. We have got Baron Draco. So this mod, done by JWE2 and Netraptor, always a dream pair, making a lot of cool mods. So this is the new version, so they've updated it and made it look really, really nice. Have a look at you, I like the colors you've got. So this is Baron Draco. So these guys are genus of pterodactyloid pterosaur that comes from the late Cretaceous around the Santonian period. Offers what the Chevlar Formation in the Balcony Mountains, where they get the name Polona Draco, in Western Hungary. So that's quite cool. So it was described in 2005 by paleontologists Antilla Osti and David Weishaupt and Julian Coletta, with the type species being Baron Draco glazy, which the genus name refers to the Balcony Mountains, and the Latin Draco means dragon. And the specific name, or Galizi, honors Professor Aldous Gallas, who helps the authors in the research project where the fossils were found in the oil open pit mining, which is quite cool. And it's actually the first ever remains of pterosaurs from Hungary, which is quite cool. So it's based on a holotype that's a nearly complete mandible, some lower jaws, and then a paratype would be found in other jaws. So it's not really known from too much. And then also some like bits of the vertebrae, things like that. Very similar to most other types of pterosaurs that had toothless jaws, especially these later ones. And two halves would have been formed like a pointed, that are vertically, almost like an arrowhead shape to them. And the estimated size for the species, the estimated jaw size is about 29 centimeters, or about 11 inches long, with a wingspan between 3.5 to 4 meters, or 11 to 13 feet, which is about medium size for a pterosaur. And because the jaws are relatively taller than other astarids, it's actually reminiscent of Tapejara and is believed to be could be a frugivore. And we'll get into the taxonomy as well. So initially, Baron Draco was assigned as an extarchid. However, paleontologists more recently in 2013 proposed that it is actually a member of the Tapejaridae and is actually slightly more basal to animals such as Tapejara and Tupandactylus. And there's been talk whether it was convergence or potentially actually related to each other. And if it is, it actually represents the only late Cretaceous Tapejarid ever, which is pretty cool. And there have been some more evidence suggesting that it is actually a Tapejarid, so most of the evidence definitely leans towards that. So related to things such as Tupandactylus, Eurobjara, Tapejara, things like that. And more recently, they've been split in their own groups, kind of Tapejarines, which includes Tapejara, Eurobjara, Tupandactylus, and then Sinoptera, which includes Eoterodon, Hupaxi, Terrace, Sinoterrace, and obviously Baron Draco. So really, really cool little bit of taxonomy there, and definitely really, really nice mod. I love how it's turned out. Definitely gone with that more Tapejarid look. So really, really cool, and I love the colors. Always love Netraptor's colors, and JWE2. I'm really glad that more porting, and you can see that classic really red one. Really, really cool. So anyway, we're going to be moving on. So we've got a lot of Jurassic animals today, which is really cool, but we're not going to be starting with that. We've got another one by HawkOwl1215. You know, we all love HawkOwl1215. We have got Housegapor. So let's have a look at this guy. Cute little guys. So let's have a look at you. There's a little goobers. Let's see if you can find one that looks really nice. I like this one though. Let's see. You two are pretty much the same. I'll have a look at you. So this is Housegapor. Sorry, I can't get too much of a better look. It is a bit small. So it disappears. Anyway, so Housegapor, which is Caesar, these guys are a genus of waterfowl like Dromaeosaurid from Mongolia that lived during the late Cretaceous, and it's only known from a single species, Housegapor in Skuili. So we'll get into why it's considered a waterfowl like later, but we'll first talk about its discovery. So the first specimen of Housegapor likely came from the Dushabab Formation in southern Mongolia, and it was illegally removed by poachers, fossil poachers in or before 2011. And the fossils were found its way to Japan and Great Britain, and was owned by several collectors for a few years until it was tamed by Edonia Fossil Company, which found it. And then it was identified as a new species, and as of 2015 was took to the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences in Brussels, and shown to paleontologist Pascal Goffin and Andrea Cow to kind of look at it, where they looked at it through a microscope and things like that, and determined it was a new species. So the holotype was found in like orange sandstone from the Dushabab Formation. It comes from the late Campanian, so about 75 million years ago. And actually is a relatively complete skeleton, so we have a pretty good idea what it looks like. And the fossils were not further prepared, so they didn't really want to break it out of the rock, so it was actually put through a synchrotron microscope to kind of look at it and study it, which is quite cool. Definitely quite cool. And they looked at it, and the top of the snout was restricted with plaster, so it's articulated, not compressed, but it's believed to be a subadult individual, so they could have got a little bit bigger. So the type species Housegapor itzkuli was described in 2017 and described by Andrew Cow, Vincent Bernard, Dennis F.A.E. Volton, Vincent Fernandez, and a whole bunch of other people, like Philip John Curry as well. Big of a list. The generic name refers to the late Polish paleontologist Hauska Olszomyska, I believe say that, who was actually quite involved in a lot of expeditions into Mongolia to look for fossils, and named the closely related Huponensis, which means robber, or Latin raptor. And then the specific name honors Itzkuli, who has made the specimen available for science, so it's kind of a way to honor the collectors, so that's quite cool. So these guys are about the size of a mallard duck. They have a head about that's 20 centimeters, 7 centimeters long, about 2.8 inches, a neck that's about 20 centimeters or 7.9 inches, and a back that's about 13 centimeters or about 5 inches, the sacrum another 5 centimeters. So really, really interesting. It's got a flattened snout, or it's been considered really duck-like, and really, really interesting skull. And actually has the most teeth out of any dinosaur in the premaxilla, which is quite interesting. So lots and lots of little teeth. The teeth in the maxilla are estimated to be between 20 to 25 and are more robust, which is quite interesting as well. And they have very elongated vertebrae, so they have quite a long neck. And they have quite a short snout to sacrum length, which is the highest among any paraavans, and which is quite interesting as well. So it's a very interesting animal. Has a lot of features that are really basal and really makes it look a lot distinct than other dinosaurs. So in terms of its classification, it's a Dromaeosaurid, and in 2017 it was described, and then a new clade was described based on this animal that is Housegaptorine, or Abscorotidate, that was coined, and then includes close relatives as Huspanens and Mahalaka, and those are kind of the close relatives of Housegapor, and Housegapor is quite basal, and then the other two are a little bit more derived in that group, which is quite interesting. And there's been some research into their paleobiology. When it was first described, they argued that it had characteristics that could actually mean it was quite good in water, so almost like a heron or a loon, that kind of behavior, or a duck. Or Masangu is another good one. So they had strong high limbs, smaller flipper-like forelimbs, and their center of gravity would have been brought more forward because of their short tail. A lot of other adaptations, such as backward curving teeth and lots of long neck and also sensor neurons to help detect vibrations in water, were all used as evidence to suggest that these guys were kind of aquatic, or semi-aquatic at least, like modern-day masangus and other types of ducks and things like that. And they would probably be in its closest ecological comparison. But all those have been kind of either disagreed, or people have been arguing against it. So it's been a little bit of debate. It doesn't have some adaptations that a lot of aquatic birds have, like thicker bones or things like that. And it doesn't really, not the end of the world, because swans, but they don't have like high density as well. Sorry about that. I think my computer just likes to shut off when I'm not using it too much. Housegapor. But yeah, really, really cool. So awesome anyway. So let's carry on. I'll just make sure that's still recording. Yep, sweet. So, yep, we're going to cut that out. So we can let these guys run off and do their thing. Really, really cool. So next up, we've got Marunasaurus, which is a really cool one. This is done by Master Dude. So let's have a look at this guy. So let them run out a little bit. So this is Marunasaurus, a very interesting animal. So this guy was originally known as the famous Amphicelius, which is a really, really big animal, which is interesting. So Marunasaurus is from the late Jurassic of the Morrison, and it was originally known as Amphicelius fragilimus, and has sometimes been described as the largest animal of all time. When it was originally described as Amphicelius, it was thought to be like about 58-60 meters long or 190 feet long and weighed about 150 tons. However, the specimen that it's known from it was lost at some point, being studied in the 1870s. So the only things that are surviving of the specimen are just basically drawings. So I don't know why they described a new species because of it. But anyway, more recent studies though have actually suggested other possibilities for this animal. So they've been looking into like what's the possibility of an animal getting this big and things like that, which is quite interesting. So the first holotype of this guy was found by Ormel William Lucas, who had been hired by Edward Drinker Cope to find this animal. And then the vertebra is quite poor condition, but it's quite large, and it was like, it's described as Amphicelius, and which is quite interesting. And then it was described, this is the original history of it, and then it disappeared where people were looking for it. In 2018, it was like a collection that was just sold to the Natural History Museum, and they couldn't really find it. It's just been lost. But then modern interpretations have kind of looked at it and be like, what really is it? So more recently, Kenneth Carpenter actually suggests this is a Riojasaurus. It's related to things like Nigersaurus and things like that, which is quite interesting. And it suggests that it was, and the enormous size of the animal was actually overestimated as well. And because it was more shaped like a Riojasaurus than a typical diplodocid, it wouldn't be nearly as big as long. So the estimates based on Lemursaurus, which is a closer relative believed to be because it's a Riojasaurus, had an animal about 31 meters or about 100 feet long, and would have put the size estimates at about 70 to 120 tons, or even slightly bigger estimates of things like 35 to 40 meters or about 115 to 131 feet, which is much less impossible than the 60 meter length of course, the old Amphicelius, but it's still within the range of kind of other larger dinosaurs, which is quite interesting. So in modern interpretations, as I mentioned, has been kind of, instead of being a diplodocid, it's a Riojasaurus, so more closest relative. As I mentioned, the size. Thinking what else we could say. Yeah, the changes of that. Paleobiology. So there's been a lot of research into like giant sauropods and how they evolved, and how they reached these large sizes and having larger guts and things like that. And through its paleoecology, it's believed to have lived in a semi-arid environment, which is almost just like a savanna. And Carpenter believed that the large size would have helped it a lot with dealing with predators. And these would have guys obviously would have lived with a lot of very famous animals such as Barosaurus, Allosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Stegosaurus, things like animals like that. And these guys would have had a well-adapted digestive system for feeding a lot of the low-quality ferns and plants. They would just eat so much, they would just pretty much be able just to get all the nutrients they can out of that. Very similar to modern-day large herbivores like elephants and rhinos. But yeah, there's not too much other to say than that. And as I mentioned, there's been lots of estimates. Because it's been considered one of the biggest dinosaurs of all time. Or believed to be, and as I mentioned, it's also known from basically fragmentary or lost remains, only from a vertebrae. So this is kind of a different interpretation of the Amphistelis that we also covered before. But still a really nice mod. I definitely love Master Dude's mods. Always does a wonderful job. So we can let you run off and do your thing. So hopefully don't take forever. This is why we often don't want to do stuff with sauropods, because they take forever to move out of the hatchery. So next up, we have got, this is kind of disjointed because I wanted to add a few more cool animals, but this is another Master Duke mod. This is part of the Jurassic pack. So this is really, really interesting. We've got Lissowikia. So let's have a look at one that's standing in a good position. I'll have a look at you. I like these guys, they're very cool. So this is Lissowikia. So these guys are an extinct genus of Dicynodont, old synapsid, that lived in what's now Poland in the latest Norian to earliest region of the late Jurassic. So a really, really late living Dicynodont. They lived to about 100, 210 to 205 million years ago. So what really gives this guy a really interesting title is it's the largest known Dicynodont and the largest non-mammalian synapsid known. So these guys would have got to about 4.5 meters long, or about 15 feet long, and stand up to about 2.6 meters tall, about 8.5 feet tall, and weighed about 5 to 7 tons, which is comparable to modern elephants, which would have made it pretty much one of the largest and also one of the last Dicynodonts, which is quite interesting. So, although a very late, it closely resembles its relatives such as Plateosaurus. They had a very big round body and were quadrupedal as well. And it actually is a very interesting adaptation, as these guys were also quite able to walk kind of like upright. A lot of Dicynodonts were kind of more like splayed. These guys actually evolved, probably helped with being bigger as well. They walked a lot more upright, getting bigger as well. And also these guys have holes in their vertebrae and things like that that could have potentially had air sacs, very much like a system of air sacs, which is quite interesting as well. So that probably would have helped them be a little bit lighter or things like that. So that's quite interesting. So, as I mentioned, in terms of its forelimbs, it actually is completely erect, so that's quite weird for them as well. But yeah, as I mentioned, the specimen isn't complete, but they are a massive size. So, some estimates even put them up to 10 tons, but that's likely an overestimate. Most likely they were around the 6 to 4 ton mark, maybe 7 tons at the bulkiest, which is comparable in size to modern African elephants. And actually the biggest, the next time that mammals would have got bigger than this, on land would have been like the Brontosaurs in the Eocene. So basically it took the dinosaurs going extinct for synapses to get this big again, which is quite interesting. So in terms of where Lissowikia is found, it is found in the Lissowic, which is a village just in southern Poland, where they found it, and as I mentioned, found to the latest Rahirians, which makes it one of the youngest Dicynodonts in the world. And then it was actually only found first discovered in 2006, and then was recognized as Dicynodont in 2008, and then it was not even described until 2019. And the genus name is named after the village Lissowic where it was found, and the species name Bonjai honors Ludwig Hendrik Bonjanus, who is a German physicist, physician, and naturalist who did pioneering work on the comparative anatomy and paleontology. And the fossils of it now are kind of, as I mentioned, held in the Polish Academy of Sciences and in Warsaw, which is quite interesting. So it is, in terms of where it fits on the family tree, it's Catametiformes, which is the group that most Jurassic Dicynodonts fit into, and its closest relatives, it's a member of Placeridae, which is related to things like Placerius and Mahomdurgia, which is quite interesting. So if you know Walking with Dinosaurs, it's basically just a giant Placerius. But as I mentioned, it's kind of the latest and greatest of the Dicynodonts that would have lived right at the end of the Jurassic, before the end Jurassic extinction, would have evolved a lot of traits to kind of, as I mentioned, like standing upright and bigger muscles to kind of get to that bigger size as well. And believed to be much like larger Dicynodonts, they would have been herbivores, feeding on not coprolites, that's their poos. They would have been using their large beaks to break a lot of plants and conifers and things like that. And there actually has been some research into like what it was eating as well. It lived with an archosaur called Smok, which is actually in this pack we'll cover later. So that would have likely been a predator for adults or young ones, or even juvenile specimens. There have been bite marks found on juvenile specimens of Lyssawikia, so they could have potentially actively predated on young Lyssawikia. Also growth, these guys actually show a rapid growth rate very similar to other larger Dynodonts, but actually show that these guys, showing their age, so they just basically just kept growing really fast. And there's also evidence they potentially would have been latrinas, so they would have all pooed in one spot, and they would have, has been documented animals that have like social, live in herds and have complex social behaviors like modern large mammals, so they would have likely had that as well. And as I mentioned, also, it had quite an interesting ecology in the late Jurassic, so they would have lived with all sorts of dinosauromorphs. They would have lived with Smok, like Coelosaurs, pterosaurs, some small crocodilomorphs, archosauromorphs, and many small early mammals and mammaliforms and amphibians and sharks and things like that. It lived in an environment very similar to the modern-day Everglades, so there would have been lots of rivers and lakes and things to reserve as well. And it's very interesting. There's not many large sauropodomorph animals in this area. There is the absence of them, so they would have been Plateosaurus was found in Germany, so there wasn't any Plateosaur-like animal living with Lyssawikia. So that suggests these guys may have actually filled the niche of the sauropodomorphs in those ecosystems and probably would have directly competed with those big sauropodomorphs. But yeah, really, really cool animal. Love being able to talk about Lyssawikia. Very, very big, very, very interesting. This guy makes it look small, of course, but yeah, really, really cool. Nice to talk about these guys. So let's keep going. So next up, I don't know why you're doing that in front of there. It's a little bit annoying. I'm going to have to trim this up anyway, it's all good. So next up we've got Riojasaurus, which is another really interesting one, done by Hockowl1215. So this is another great Hockowl, and that happens. Yes, of course it happens. There we are. I like the colours on this one. I like the greyish. I think that looks quite nice. So this is Riojasaurus, which means ridge or lizard. These guys were early sauropodomorph from the La Herida province of Argentina, and would have lived in the late Triassic as well. So as I mentioned, we've got a lot of Triassic animals today. Would have found the Los Colobos Formation in the Iguacho-Vela Union Basin. So this guy was described by Bonaparte in 1969, and based on the holotype specimen that includes a postcranial skeleton, but lacks the skull and mandibles. But there's a few other specimens kind of described as well. But also some have been stolen from the National Museum of La Regiona in Argentina, so we don't actually know where they are, which is a little bit sad. But these guys are quite cool. So this was a heavy, bulky animal, and it was actually dense and quite massive for an early sauropodomorph. Early estimates of their size was about 6.6 meters or 20 feet long, and it weighed about 800 kilograms, or larger individuals have even been estimated to reach about 10 meters and about 3 tons. But contrast, this vertebrae would have also helped. And unlike most other early sauropodomorphs, they had 4 sacral vertebrae instead of 3, so that's quite interesting. The nearly equal length of their hind and forelimbs have suggested a quadrupedal gait, but however, the morphology of the shoulder seems to be inconsistent. So even though they have big limbs, they're kind of on that way becoming the big 4-legged sauropods that we know and love. So there was no skull actually found with the first skeleton of Riojasaurus, so there was one found later. They had serrated teeth and very conical teeth as well, very similar to like their relatives. And in terms of their comparison between the cycloic rings or their eyes, they would have very much had ability to be carthermal, so active during the day during certain intervals, so they would have been around all the time. So really, really cool. So they're in their own group of like family of early sauropodomorphs called Riojasauridae, and they believed to be closely related to the animals such as Marunasaurus, is known from the early Triassic, early Jurassic. However, it suggests that it's quite unique and is actually quite different from other sauropodomorphs as well. And due to the size and limb anatomy of Riojasaurus, these guys are considered to be quite close relatives of early sauropods, so this is kind of the late game before they started really becoming those big sauropods that we know and love. But yeah, really, really interesting. And these guys are from the late Jurassic around the Dorian stage, about 227 to 213 million years ago. And is the only known Riojasaurus that lived in South America, so that's quite interesting. So I believe others are found across the world. But yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to let you run off and do your thing. Next up, we got obviously the very famous one. So there's another one from Master Dude's Jurassic Pack. We're going to look at another early sauropodomorph. We've got Plateosaurus. So here's Plateosaurus, wonderful guy. So Plateosaurus means broad lizard, but is often misinterpreted as being flat lizard. These guys are Plateosaur dinosaur that lived in the late Jurassic about 214 to 204 million years ago and lived in Central and Northern Europe. So these guys are another early basal sauropodomorph, often considered a prosauropod, but that's an outdated term. And the type species, there's a few different species. I believe there's 4 different species, but the type species is Plateosaurus trolongensis, which before 2019 it was actually given to another species, but it was ruled out as undiagnostic. And currently there's about 3 valid species and one that's okay. That's quite cool. So first described in 1834, physician Johann Friedrich Earnhardt, I believe you say that, was discovered some vertebrae and leg bones near Nuremberg, Germany, and then 3 years later another paleontologist, Hermann von Merger, actually described the type specimen of a new genus, Plateosaurus. And since then, it's quite a well-known dinosaur. There's been about 100 individuals of Plateosaurus found throughout Europe, which is quite interesting, known from 50 different locations across Germany, Switzerland, and France. So quite well known. And obviously, of course, there's other species as well and other specimens. There's also a quarry that's been found with them, about 35 partially complete skeletons, as well as fragmentary remains of about 70 individuals. So that suggests they could have been, of course, herd species as well. So the etymology, as I mentioned, is not quite clear. So as I mentioned, it's been often interpreted as flat lizard, or broad lizard, but now it's actually broad lizard. So it's been a little bit of like what it actually is, kind of language being language. But as I mentioned, there's about 3 valid species. There's not really too much differentiating them, and there's also the big things like they could be like paraphyletic because there's actually several species. It's one of those things, taxonomy being taxonomy, basically got to go back and kind of sort it out. But they don't seem to be too different from each other than maybe size and things like that. Not very much in terms of diagnostic traits, but it is what it is anyway. But in terms of being, obviously, herbivorous bipedal dinosaur, early sauropodomorph, very similar looks. So they've got a kind of a small skull, long neck, and walk around on their back legs. Their arms are actually very short, even for prosauropods, which is interesting. So it's believed they were strongly built and able to grab, though. So quite strong. And they do walk around on their high limbs, like very much, like very typical dinosaur look. Their skull is also small and narrow, and it's actually nearly 3 times as long as it is high. So these guys would have had lots of teeth that were leaf-shaped for feeding on plants and things like that, so really well adapted for that. And some actually preserve cycloric rings, which actually the ring of bone that protects the eye. Also, as well, the ribs were connected to 2 joints. They have a hinge joint as well. And there's been some estimates on sizes. There's a lot of variation on sizes. So the largest individuals would have been potentially about 700 kilograms, which is quite interesting as well, which is actually typical value for birds. And they would have actually had those kind of egg sacs and things like that as well, because they were obviously like sauropods that would have had the egg sacs that helps to breed them more like birds. And evidence of bone histology suggests they were endothermic or warm-blooded animals, which is quite interesting. So they would have breed like birds and would have had a metabolism like a bird. And the type species as well is about 4.8 to 10 meters long, or about 16 to 32 feet, and weighed between 600 to 4,000 kilograms, or between 1,300 to 1,800 pounds. And then there's also some smaller, 4 or 5 meters, things like that. So in terms of classification, it was considered a prosauropod, which is not a monophyletic group. So most researchers prefer the term early sauropodomorph or basal sauropodomorph. And then it was originally described as a bunch of different things. It was created the group Pachypods, which include like iguanodon, things like that, to kind of better described. And then it was described as prosauropod. And then it's been like more and more as we look around, it was try to find its kind of relationships in the family tree. So like Plateosauridae as has been put in now. So as I mentioned, it's very much thought to be walk like a kangaroo, but now it's suggested to be just walk like a normal dinosaur. There's some people that thought it would have walked around on all fours, but most recent evidence suggests that these guys would have walked around on their back legs. Their front legs were not sturdy enough, and their shoulders were not built to actually support weight, but they could have used it very much for grappling, things like that. As I mentioned as well, they would have been pretty much kind of herbivores. Those have been found with gastroliths in their stomach, so very much like other sauropods and even birds today and alligators, they would have used it potentially to help digest food. And there's also evidence, as I mentioned, to be like endothermic, so not being able to, always have, all the things like that, which is quite cool. And we do have actually bone histology, so we know how much they grow. So there were some individuals are full grown at 12 years old, some were still growing at 20, so that's very much like all over the place. So it's very interesting as well. So in terms of where they lived in the Laurentian Formation, always a bit of Norian, which is about the Laurentian Formation about 227 to 208 million years ago. So would have lived with animals like Lemursaurus and all sorts of different types of amphibians and small dinosaurs, things like that. So that's a really, really cool animal. I do love Plateosaurus. Really, really awesome. So I'll let you run off and do your thing, of course. So our last animal from the pack, also done by Master Dude, we've got Smylosuchus, another really, really cool one. So let's have a look at Smylosuchus. So hopefully you don't run around. I don't want you running around just yet. We'll have a look at you. I guess they get scared of the Plateosaurus, but we'll have a look at you. Look at this pretty guy. So this is Smylosuchus. So Smylosuchus is an extinct genus of Phytosaur from the late Jurassic of North America. So it was first described in 1995 under the name Leptosuchus georgini, and because of its large crest, it was thought to be distinct from other ones which had more distinct crests. And then some studies suggest that Smylosuchus was kind of cogeneric with this guy, and and the crest could have independently developed. However, recent evidence suggests that Smylosaurus is distinct, and then there's there's a little bit of taxonomy things here and there. But it's a phytosaur. So if you guys don't know about phytosaurs, they look very, very much like crocodilians, but the main way you can tell them apart is that they almost have like whale-like nostrils at the back of their head there, so their nostrils would have been up about here. So that's one of the really weird things that sets them apart, but they also have a crest. They're not related to crocodilians, modern crocodilians, much at all. They are both archosaurs, but that's pretty much where it ends. So they're a really great example of convergent evolution, would have lived through the Jurassic and kind of filled that niche that crocodiles fill today, which is quite interesting. So like all phytosaurs, it would have its nostrils on its head, and then its bulge, the nasal bulge and rostral crest would have been larger than Smylosuchus. And then many other phytosaurs, so would have done quite well. And these guys would have been quite big too, so they varied in size. The skull was extremely large, about 1.5 meters, even though the estimates of their length has varied from 7 to 12 meters, or about 23 to 39 feet. And these jaws would have been very short and broad and heterodont, and these would have had very blade-like teeth, especially the large tusks to be able to bring flesh closer to the mouth. And the tusks are mounted on the bulge, as you can see there. You can see almost got tusks going on, but have had a quite powerful bite. And coupled with their large size, these were among the largest known of all the phytosaurs. They would have probably hunted large prey, such as Placereus, so they would have had a very similar crocodilian niche going on, which is still quite cool, and definitely cool to have a phytosaur in the game finally. Really, really awesome. So I'm going to let you run off and do your thing. Of course, and they like to run around because they're scared of the Plateosaurus, because it's based on a bigger carnivore. Anyway, let's carry on. Last animal from the Jurassic pack, we have got Smok. So here's a cool one. This is Smok. So Smok's been a little bit of debate recently, but we'll talk Smok, which means dragon in Polish. These guys are a genus of large carnivorous archosaur. So they lived during the latest Jurassic, around the Dorian early Rhyhadian stage, about 208 to 205 million years ago, and would have been found in southern Poland with our good friend Riojasaurus, in the same place as well. And the only species is Smok waswicki from the Washwell dragon, which is a dragon in Polish folklore. It was named in 2012. It is larger than any known predatory archosaur from the late Jurassic or early Jurassic of Central Europe, and there's been a little bit of debate where it fits on the family tree. We know it's an archosaur at least, but it's suggested to be maybe a Rarasuchian, a Pseudosuchian, a Prestosuchian, so another type of like crocodile, or even a theropod dinosaur. There's been suggested it may be a theropod, which is interesting. But we really don't know. Most of it suggests it is a Rarasuchian. But it is a big animal, so about 5 to 6 meters long. It was the largest carnivorous archosaur in Central Europe at the time. It was larger than any dinosaur or pseudosuchian living in Europe at the time, as I mentioned. And the skull was about 50 to 60 centimeters long. Several features do indicate that it's an archosaur, so things like the serrated teeth and things like that show, but it has many derived features and interesting. And it has many features both of dinosaurs and crocodile-line archosaurs, so we really don't know if it's like a more crocodilian side or actually more dinosaur. So it's one of those animals that's just got so many weird features that we can't really place it until we've really looked into it more. But it's actually, as I mentioned, found in this near where actually Riojasaurus was found in the same formation. Latest Northern to early Jurassic in the Housegapor village. The first remains of Smok or a jawbone and fragments of the skull. It was thought to be a theropod dinosaur, but then thought to be very similar to Allosaurus, and it was thought to be kind of very similar to Tyrannosaurus rex. But then it was actually found to be quite different. And there have been actually footprints found where it is, and they may believe to have belonged to Smok, but we don't have foot bones that associate with it. Be very, very interesting. And Smok was actually the largest predator in its ecosystem, so very much similar to, the T-Rex of the Jurassic of Europe. Would have lived with other dinosaurs like the Dinosaurs and Rarasuchids, Plateosaurus, and Tetrasaurus. These animals would have been much smaller and would have been one of the largest archosaurs at the time, and then would have lived with animals such as like small carnivorous dinosaurs and purposaurid archosaurs, also small archosaurs and things, and also Riojasaurus, which would probably have been prey, as we mentioned, so they probably would have eaten young or even sick Riojasaurus, because they would have been quite big, probably big for even these guys to handle. So evidence of coprolites indicates these guys were actually still quite strong, able to digest bone, and found bone fragments from the coprolites, and there would have been lots of animals they would have eaten, like tender spondylus, dinosaurs, and fish, so they've been quite generalized predators, and the heavy amounts of bones suggest that these guys would have eaten a lot of bones as well, which had salt marrow, which would have taken them in, which is an important behavior found in a lot of mammalian predators, but not often in archosaurs, so it seems these guys may have been a little bit more mammalian than we like to admit, and probably because they were most likely warm-blooded as well. Probably would have done that too. So yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see Smok, an animal I love talking about. Really cool interpretation too. It really does fit the game quite well. So, I'm going to let you run off and do your thing. So last but certainly not least, we have got, this one's a bit of a mouthful. So this is a Karadonsaurus mod done by Al Reptilio, Game Videos for Life, Viral Cyclops, and Surreality, but a lot of people have made contributed to this mod. So this is kind of an accuracy edit based on Al Reptilio, who is a artist that's been posting a lot of like redrawings to making dinosaurs and Jurassic World Evolution 2 accurate. But it's really nice that one of his designs made it to the game. So let's have a look at Karadonsaurus. So look at this guy, really, really wonderful. I love this design. It's got to be one of the best. I love it. Anyway, so let's have a look. So we can see it's changed a lot from the original Jurassic World one. It doesn't have the really, really skinny face. It has a very typical Karadontasaurid big head there. Also much bigger neck, those big arms. Pretty much just fits the proper anatomy. Big round body, long tail, almost like a higher crest going on there. So very much fits the proper Karadonsaurus anatomy. But what's really, really cool, and I really love that it's got this line of feathers. I really love how these feathers have been rendered super well. And it's cool that it's been added to an animal that actually doesn't have feathers originally. So it's really, really nice. This is a cosmetic, so it doesn't replace your original Karadonsaurus in game. So you can have both, which is quite cool. But yeah, I just love it. Evidence of the fossils and dinosaurs, I've gone over this quite a few times actually. It's very possible that dinosaurs may have evolved them independently, or very possible that the basal group of Ornithodira may have, which is because pterosaurs have pycnofibers, and then dinosaurs have feathers, and then we have all sorts of dinosaurs with feather-like structures from like Psittacosaurus up to, you know, modern birds. It's very possible that they could have evolved before dinosaurs were a thing, or they could have evolved multiple times in different lineages. So we had the pycnofibers, I keep saying phytosaur, but pycnofibers in pterosaurs, and then you have feathers evolve independently in theropods and also independently in ornithischians. So I really don't know which, but it's both equally likely, which is quite cool. So this interpretation of Karadonsaurus with feathers does make sense. Some of its earliest relatives or early relatives did have feathers. So it's not impossible, and I just think it gives it such an interesting outline. But you can see the more accurate face, big round body with those teeth, the shark teeth that are great for biting to prey. Nice big lips as well. I do love the big lips. Nice big crest as well. Nice big robust body. Nice big arms as well. Nice long tail. I like the clavicle bulge there, and you can see the itching boot. So it is pretty much spot on. And you can see also, based on a relative that was discovered only a couple years ago, Megaraxes, almost had like a big claw there, very similar to like Seraemas or raptor dinosaurs. So you can see it's got interpreted as kind of a big dew claw that would most likely have been helped to kind of rip into prey. Not like a raptor, but potentially like hold it down and be able to pin it so you can pull off bits of meat and things like that. So really, really cool that a lot of new evidences were introduced to this guy. So yeah, really cool interpretation of Karadonsaurus. So I really do love it. But yeah, I think this is a great place to finish the video. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this new version. You know, we're back again, you know, very, very awesome. So yeah, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.